You're very, very lucky. We have Mitch today who will be walking us through Compass GPS as well as a live demo, which is always really exciting. So this is Compass GPS 4.2 we're up to at the moment. Is that right, Mitch?
It is correct, 4.2.
And so a first fit, I think if we are able to do this quite quickly and efficiently, it really makes clinical life a whole lot easier. Mitch comes from a strong clinical background, and I think you're very lucky to have him today to present this topic.
You're too kind, Jacinta.
Whilst we're on the topic of introductions, I think it's probably worth introducing myself, and why not use a minute for my fame to plug myself. But I am new to the team. Mitch, if you just wanted to sort of flick, I think, to the next slide, we're probably ready to do that now. We have a few more guests that have joined, but this is the full Widex team you have looking after you. Mitch, who is New South Wales and ACT and Queensland, the account and product manager. We also have Brent, who's looking after New Zealand, Taylor, who looks after Victoria and Tasmania, and myself, who is looking after South Australia, WA, and the Northern Territory, whilst Ian is on sick leave. So, a little bit of a background. I have worked with Widex for about 7 years in different roles in different areas of the world, which is exciting. But recently I've worked in Asia and the Middle East, looking after accounts there, growing Widex in the business internationally. But I have moved back now, and I'm very happy to be joining this team. We all bring a lot of different strengths to the table, and I think what is important is we are living in quite a challenging, different environment. Something that we've sort of had to learn, obviously, is this virtual field, this virtual space, and what I think is important that we continue to support you in this way. So what we've done, and what you would have noticed, you answered 3 questions for us, which was extremely helpful, and we've collated this information on the topics that you're interested in, the topics that you feel you need a little bit more support on, and we will have a webinar series where we will address some of those popular topics. So obviously today we're kicking off with Compass GPS and the first fit, but in 2 weeks' time we'll have another topic ready to go. So make sure you're keeping an eye out on your emails and subscribing, because I think we are able to reach each of you now virtually, and everybody's pretty good at using these systems, so why not use that to our advantage? On that note as well, we have some housekeeping. It's the general stuff. So if you have any questions as we're going through this webinar today, please pop them in the chat box. We have the team manning the chat box, and we will answer those questions at the end. But if you could just pop them in there rather than trying to unmute yourself, I think it will make everybody's life easier. But on that note, I'm ready to pass it over to Mitch. I can talk for hours, but I think it's his turn definitely to take over the wheel, and I hope that you enjoy the session. So over to you, Mitch.
Thanks so much for that intro, Jacinta. It's great to have you on board. I know everyone's really excited to have you in that role, definitely. So thanks for that introduction. As you mentioned before, Jacinta, we do find ourselves in tricky times, but we're really grateful to be able to reach out and hopefully offer some insights, some tips and some tricks around GPS Compass, ensuring a success for a first fitting every time. The live demonstration I'll be presenting today can also be applied to seasoned hearing aid users. And for some, that may be quite intuitive for Widex users. For others, it might be entirely novel. We'll open the floor for questions towards the end of the half hour today, but please feel free to add any questions that you might have into the dialogue box, which I believe has been manned by a team member today, and we'll come around full circle and answer those towards the end of today. I'm going to give you a quick recap on our product portfolio before jumping straight into it. So we have 6 performance levels to suit the technology needs and preferences for all clients. When we talk about giving clients options, it's not just about the style, it's also about the technology as well. So you can see here we have our moment range to the left, moment 440, 330, 220 down to the 110. In our essential range, we have the Magnify 110 and Magnify 50, which you can see on the right here and here. Now, Moment was added around 15 months ago in 2020, and Magnify, our newest edition, added around 4 months ago, part of our essential range, both within the COVID timeframe as well. But they're both great additions to the Widex portfolio, and we're quite proud of them as well. It covers a fully subsidised, the Magnify, that is, covers a fully subsidised and low-end top-up option, the Magnify 50 and the Magnify 110 respectively. Now, the crux of today is Compass GPS. The current software version is the 4.2.2109, which is what I'll be demonstrating today in a first fit scenario. For those of you that don't have 4.2.2109, please get in touch after today and I can send you through that link, or you can update it in your GPS updater as well, but 4.2 is what we want. Now, for those of you not familiar with Widex Compass, I'm hoping the demonstration will provide a really tangible understanding of how GPS Compass operates in its current form and how this would be applied to a first fitting audiological setting for any clinician around the country. So let's quickly talk about some of the benefits of Compass GPS and then we'll jump into the live demonstration. You'll notice a huge emphasis of today will be around the stepwise application of both the feedback test, first and foremost, and then the sensorgram, and then going from there into our fine tuning, if at all. The feedback in a nutshell, you're probably all familiar with feedback in some form, maybe not with the Widex version of it though. So basically measuring just how much of a hearing aid sound is escaping from the ear canal of a specific individual, not just a general measurement basically. Takes into account the person's ear canal acoustics, and by measuring how much sound is leaking out, we know how much sound should be going in essentially. So we're ensuring the user is experiencing sufficient and high quality sound with the right tip for them given their audiological requirements as well. Now, the sensorgram, it's a type of hearing test which is unique to Widex that measures the person's hearing aid thresholds by using the actual hearing aids themselves in the ear, in situ. This way we get a more accurate and precise fit as we know and learn how much of the hearing aid output is actually reaching and being heard at the level of the eardrum, so the level of perception as well. How much volume we need to go across all the frequencies, not just your highs, not just your lows. Again, this will be slightly different to what you would get with an audiogram, headphones, ear tips, in the free field, and that's due to the specifics of the actual hearing device in the ear, whether that be a custom tip, a dome, whatever it may be, it's taking that into account as well. At Widex, we're not in the business of fitting audiograms, we're in the business of fitting clients or people or patients. So it's really important we follow these steps stepwise. We're quite puritanical about it, as you'll soon see. Fun fact, I'm not sure if anyone was in the lobby earlier, Senso, or that root Senso, should ring a bell for some Widex users. For those who aren't familiar with Widex, Senso was our first digital hearing aid released when I was 6 in 1996, so it was a while ago now. So these steps are simple for some, but you'd be surprised how many people skip or manipulate the software and don't follow these in the puritanical sense that I'm talking about it. The 3 phases known as our true acoustics are combined for the new fitting rationale and include both the Magnify and Moment range, even at the free to client level as well, the Magnify 50 at the minute, giving you 1, more high frequency gain, 2, less compensation of gain in low frequency areas, and 3, a more accurate vent effect, which is really important for that uptake of hearing aids in the first sense, in the first fitting as well. Ties into our pure sound a little bit as well, which I won't go into great depth on today, but yeah, it ties in there as well. A more natural sounding fit basically from the get-go for everybody. These improvements are implemented in all fitting rationales found in GPS, including our own Widex fitting rationale, DSL, now 1, now 2, across the board, it'll apply our true acoustic. By measuring the feedback test and sensorgram, now called True Acoustics, you're giving them a true personal prescription and not just a generic one size fits all. And that's really important to what we do at Widex. Now, without further ado, I think we should jump into it. I think this is what everyone's come to see today. So I'm going to jump quickly into Noah, and we're basically going to start from scratch as if you had the client in the fitting. Okay, so I'll jump out of there and straight into Noah. Now, we've done our audiogram, and that's where I'm picking up. So we've just done our audiogram. Could be a severe presbyacusis, could be a mild, but we're going to pick this client here named Mitchell Barrie, age 30. So let's jump into Compass. Hitting that a click there. Currently turning on my Pro link. Now, with some of the newer devices that have that Bluetooth capability, we can also use our Noah Link wireless, but the Pro link will do every Widex device you can think of that's less than 15 years old, basically. So the ProLink's my go-to. It's what I'll be using today. So I've just switched that on there. Now the devices I'm going to be fitting today, Moment 440, Emric rechargeable device. So I'm taking those out of the charger now and I'm popping them in my loop. I'm not going to put them in my ears for the sake of wearing the headphones, but just pretending they're in there and popping them within the ProLink loop. My ProLink's on. Now, before I jump in there and connect, I get a lot of questions with people that aren't as familiar with Widex. How do I set my ProLink with Bluetooth adapter? Compass setup, interface, and you can toggle through all of them there. You can take them out. USB link, Nearcom, Noah Link wireless for our Bluetooth devices, and good old trusty ProLink as well, which I'm using today with the Bluetooth adapter. You can always have a look at the audiometry as well, selecting our medium that we're doing the audiogram with. So free field, headphones, insert phones with an ear mod, whatever it may be, basically. We can also designate our rationale before we even connect also. So let's connect them. Now, what I find really handy with Widex devices, if I'm selecting a device for a new fit, or if I'm selecting a device in general and I reallocate the sidedness of the device, this used to be a left one, it's going to tell me. So rather than having to play the prompt and saying which ear can you hear that in, it's going to tell me off the bat, which I think is fantastic. So let's jump in there. I'm going to go for a new fitting today, new fitting experience. So that's currently just picking them up, and we'll jump straight in there. Okie dokie. Now, as I was mentioning before, we are very puritanical at Widex about the specifications of the device. As I said, we're not fitting an audiogram, we're fitting a person who's in front of us a lot of the time, unless it's a remote care appointment. It's very important that we're making the correct selection. So in this instance, it is a V2 receiver, medium power. That's your power receiver there. Now, you'll notice that little Compass GPS symbol, and what that's indicating is what the software would recommend. So if you're ever in doubt, based on the audiogram, it's going to give you that little designation there to tell you what it should be, or what the software GPS Compass feels it should be. And we're using an open ear tip today. Say it's a mild, we can jump in there as well. It's a very mild presbyocusis shaped loss at the ripe old age of 30, but it's basically designating what it feels it should be. Open vent as well. Can play the sounds in there just to see which is which. And I can copy that over and just do it on the right if it's the same on the left. Let's jump in there. Okay. So before I jump straight into the feedback and sensorgram, I will show you a couple of troubleshooting tips that I get asked quite frequently as well before we jump into it. So I'm going to select experience today, just because it gives you a little bit more gain, a bit more of a push to fiddle with and demonstrate to you. So you'll see I'm in session start. Quality assurance can be a really handy tool, especially given the current circumstances around COVID. It's fitted the audiogram in there. So it's taken its first measurement and applied them to the hearing devices. So jumping back into session start just quickly, again, we can look at Compass setup, interface, etc. We can do a bit of a troubleshoot on the devices, whether it be moisture, whether it be an issue with the receiver, wax in the domes. This is going to designate that and give me an idea as well. Kind of like a feedback canceller. Clicking the start test in it, if there is an issue, it's going to give me a surface level estimation of what that might be. Really good for the remote care fitting situation as well, so I can sort of troubleshoot before I physically see the client as well. Transferring settings from a previous fit, firmware updates, which is very important as well. Firmware is up to date on these devices, the Moment 440s, which is fantastic. Reinstallation is possible if I so choose. Remote link as well, which I don't have today, and the ProLink's good to go. Jumping into selection quickly. If I want to change the dome that's on the devices midway through the fitting, I can do so. Jumping in there, again, we've got our compass symbol designating that it should be an open tip given the audiometric results. Copying that over, and a product list down the bottom here as well. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. So jumping into the fitting. Alrighty, this is probably my favourite thing about Widex, having fitted a multitude of different manufacturers' devices. This really catches my eye with Widex. So I've set this to speech tracker, real-time speech tracker. There's also the sound tracker as well, and different measurements you might want, output versus frequency, output versus input, speech spectra, etc. I find this one a really nifty tool. Before I jump into the feedback test and sensorgram, I want to show you something with the speech tracker, which I find really good in the fitting scenario. If you want to involve your client a little bit more, or if you want to juxtapose what I'm doing in the contents of GPS with the audiogram, this is a really good tool for it, and I'll show you why. Let's say we've got a presbyocusis. It's worse in the highs, it's better in the lows. I want to demonstrate to my client what the hearing aids are actually doing in the ear. So what I'm going to say to them is, look, mate, you have a bit of a high frequency loss. You're missing out on some of the consonant sounds. You're missing out on some of the sensitivity of speech. I want to demonstrate that to you. The S sound that you hear at the end of a word that indicates a plural or whatever that may be, you're not hearing that as well as you used to. Let's see what the hearing aids are doing. S, 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 ch, 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 ch. You'll see that peak at 4 kilohertz there, showing them a high frequency sibilant or fricative, basically, the ch and the s. Let's try a nasal, which sits sort of towards the middle between 1 and 2 kilohertz. M, 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 n, 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 m, 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 n, n, n. And you'll notice we have that standout peak at about 1.5 kilohertz there. And then to give that contrast of the vowel sound or a deeper sound to your client, I can say, look, your lower frequencies aren't too bad, but let's demonstrate it with the speech tracker. Oh, 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 oh. And you'll see we have that peak at about 250, 300 hertz in that vowel space as well. So it's a really good tool. I can flick back to the audiogram and say, look at that curve, look at what they're doing in real time. Really good way to involve or give agency back to your client within the realms of the fitting, not just putting them in and saying, look, they work because they work, actually showing them as well. So I quite like the speech tracker. Let's jump into the feedback test. As far as feedback cancellation tests go, there's not a huge deviation in the Widex model. It's what it does that's actually differentiating it. What I'm about to take now will also be automatically implied in the sensorgram, which I'll show you as well. So I'm just going to run that quickly now and I'll be quiet. Okay, they're both calibrated now. Those results will be taken into sensorgram, and you'll see I've got that lovely green tick for feedback. We're basically halfway there. Let's jump into the sensorgram. Now, one of the common issues or comments I get from Widex users is with the sensorgram, they might not have enough time to do every frequency listed. In that instance, it's not a cardinal sin just to do your cardinal or your main frequencies, 500, 1 kilohertz, 2 and 4, which I'm just going to quickly do now for the purpose of the demonstration. Now, what a lot of people also comment to me is the fact that the audiogram estimation and then the equivalent adult threshold, which is the dotted line, don't match up. That's a good thing, and I'm going to explain to you why. So when I'm doing my in situ audiogram, basically I'm setting the decibels and playing the tone with the device's in-ear. It's an in situ audiogram, or it's an in-ear measure of what they can hear with the hearing aids in. So playing the sounds there and then activating the tone, giving me an idea of what they can hear and where. You'll see as I come lower, there's more of a gap between my estimated adult threshold and my sensorgram or my audiogram hearing threshold level. That's a good thing. That means that the software is taking into account the discrepancy between what's been heard with the device and what was heard with the audiogram being taken. With the audiogram, we're using an insert tube, for example, nice and occluding. We're getting those softer low frequency sounds. The low frequencies aren't bouncing off the tympanic membrane and coming back out. With the hearing aid, these ones, for example, they're vented. It's an open dome. Some of that sound is escaping. Ergo, I need a bit more amplification in the low frequencies. That discrepancy we can see here, that's factoring that in. So I know visually or aesthetically that can be bothersome to see that there, and a lot of clinicians that I've witnessed will actually, just for the sake of it, even that up. I don't want you to do that. I want you to keep that disparity that you can see on screen. It allows GPS Compass to take into account that vent effect and make accommodations for it, basically. So I've done my my sensogram now. Jumping into adaptation, depending on how you like to do it in your clinic, we can set automatic adaptation, or we can just leave it off until your time's 3 if it's an HSP appointment as well. So I'll leave that up to you entirely, but there is the adaptation measure there. We've followed our 3 steps. We've put in the specifics of the hearing aid. We've done our sensogram. We've done our adaptation. In a lot of instances, that should be enough. We're good to go. You can basically save it and say, see you later. I'll see you in 2 weeks for your times 3. We do often get clients, though, that will want a bit of fine tuning on top of that. So we can also jump in here. So I'll take you through this briefly. I am mindful of the time. So jumping into our fine tuning, low frequency stabilization, that estimation has been taken from our feedback cancellation. And as I said, the sensogram, factoring in that discrepancy between what I can hear with the hearing aid and what I heard with the audiogram. It's contrasting those two and it's giving an estimation. It blanks that out. Not everyone's going to be happy with the way it sounds. The voice might be a little bit too boomy still after all those measures. In that case, what I'm going to do is click the low frequency stabilization off, and I can go in there and adjust my low frequencies if I so choose, just by turning off the low frequency stabilization. So pretty essential with the gain handles. It's probably something that most people have seen before. We can make those adjustments there as well. We can keep it in speech tracker, or we can toggle through and look at it, output versus frequency, for example, or our sound tracker. So there's a few options there which you can explore as well. We also have the option of looking at how it meets its targets. So I'll just jump in there. Now, verifications for our Australian audience is a topic that we'll be having a look at in a subsequent webinar. I believe the one in 2 weeks' time or a month's time, but I will go over it superficially here. So we can look at our compression targets here, having a look at our MPO, our insertion gain, our soft, our normal, and our loud insertion gain as well. And we can also look at the targets based on the audiogram. Just click that one there. So it's giving you an idea of how well that's reaching target in the fine tuning. So I guess the logical conclusion you make from that is, well, if I can see it's meeting targets there, why would I do REMS? And that's a question for another day, but it is HSP approved for, or in lieu of REMS, basically. So that's a whole nother topic there, but this is our equivalent to REMS within the software. Another few things I'll show you, we have a solution guide. So if you can't quite hit the nail on the head, we can always take the easy way out. Overall loudness, hearing and noise, whatever that may be. A few other things, solution guide, adaptation again, audibility extender, feedback manager. I can have a look at how aggressive or mild I want to take it. So if they've assumed that there's a risk of feedback and I want to take less risk because that's really bothersome for the client, I can minimize the risk there, or I can maximize the gain and roll the dice a little bit more with it. The feedback canceller is really good. So it is defaulted to maximum gain there, and that shouldn't be a problem in most instances. Our MPO manager, where you want to set the roof, and then verifications there as well. Call log here, program use, environment input level, and our handling. So all of our decks and accessories, you can find them here, registering them there, looking for instructions, that kind of thing, mobile connectivity, and our instructions as well. And getting an idea in the log of the program use, environment, and input levels. Very sort of surface level look at our fitting today. Ideally, once we've done our stepwise overview, feedback, test, and sensogram, we should be good to go from there. A little bit of fine tuning, why not? We can jump in, have a fiddle with the handles there as well. Should be good to go for a first fitting. Asking the client how that sounds, and we're good to go. We can save it. I think this was from Mitchell Barrie, and we are good to go. So I'm going to end the session there and sort of circle back a bit. So end the session. And that's just saving to the devices. And there we go. And close GPS. Alrighty. So I'll jump back into my PowerPoint. So that was our hands-on demonstration. Mindful of the time, we're going okay. So what I'll do is I'm now going to open the floor to questions, and I might get Jacinta back on board to help me out with that. Are you there, Jacinta?
I absolutely am.
Fantastic. Now, I think people have been putting some questions in the dialogue box. Geraldine, have we got any questions there?
So I can actually read them here myself.
Fantastic.
And what P has done is asked a really good question around audibility extender. And I think this topic's quite an interesting one. So audibility extender is essentially frequency transposition. What Widex does is they copy and paste sounds into an audible range for the client. So whether that's, below 1.5 kilohertz or 2, you can actually set where that starts and ends. Why I mentioned a copy and paste system, not every manufacturer does use this because we know cochlear dead regions. We don't know a lot of information around cochlear dead region. We're not sure if sound doesn't stimulate and work. So we're actually leaving that open, and we're able to just copy and paste the sound into the audible range. So if you would like more information on that, we have quick guides and we have an overview, but also we're obviously reach out to us. We're always happy to walk you through exactly what you can do with the audibility extender. You can customize it quite a bit. So the other question Geraldine has actually asked is, how many of you use speech tracker in the clinic? So we didn't have many responses, but as we're chatting away now, if you wanted to add in a Y or an N, a yes or a no, just to let us know. It's nice to hear what you do use and what you don't use, and maybe how we can maximize your clinic time. And we've got a few N's coming through, so not all of you are using speech tracker.
But you will now, I'm sure, after that demonstration.
Exactly. There is no reason not to, but we are again able to go through that in a bit more detail if you want. So we have another question. The software doesn't automatically save as you go along, only at the end. Mitch, do you want to take that one?
It should auto save throughout the fitting. So I think, I'm not sure how many minutes it leaves between, but each adjustment that's made is essentially auto saved as you go along. So I'm not sure what is going on in that instance for that particular clinician. Perhaps get in touch with me when you can, but it definitely should be auto saving. I always auto save at the end, just out of habit, but yeah, it should be doing that as we go along through the fitting. Absolutely.
I also like what you did there, Mitch, and added some notes. I tend to do the notes as well, just in case you've made some particular change and you want to quickly look at that time. It's really useful as a log.
A prompt. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so any more questions coming through? We've had a couple of yeses for the speech tracker. Which is
speech tracker, it's good to hear.
Yeah. Okay. If anybody does want to unmute their mic now, then I think is a good time. You can pop your hand up and we'll unmute you if you do want to say something verbally. We have another question that just came through the chat box though. So what does the low frequency stabilization do to the frequency gain?
It locks in place. So that's a good question actually. So the low frequency stabilization is an estimation of what the software figures the low frequencies should be. So that's taking into account the venting of whatever it may be, the dome, the mold, that kind of thing, given the receiver and the hearing aid that's in the ear, but it's also taking into account the audiogram as well. So it's taking both specifications, putting them together, running whatever calculations it does, and that's giving you what GPS Compass feels should be your low frequencies. So by unticking that box, you're allowing yourself to play with the insertion gain or with the gain in general, with the compression handles. But that's basically an allocation as to what it feels should be at your low frequency. So it's trying to ensure a natural sound for a first fitting, basically, which is where our pure sound program sort of takes it a little bit further. But I think that that's a first step in that direction for low frequency stabilization. Did you have anything to add to that, Jacinta?
No, I think you answered that perfectly. I think what we see time and time again with Compass is you have the opportunity to make a lot of fine-tune adjustments and customize, but actually if you just also want a quick fit version, you've got that opportunity as well with your 3 green bubbles and going through a first fit. So you can sort of complicate it a little bit more if you want, or at least open up the handles, open up the gain handles, the capability, depending on how you feel. So I think it's a nice software to work with for that reason. We haven't, as a manufacturer, blocked off anything. You can do a lot, which is nice.
I think the idea is for Widex to be intuitive. So it's as complicated as you want it to be. So I think the idea of following that formula of doing your feedback test, doing your sensorgram is, if you don't want to think about it, if you don't want to get into the fine tuning, you don't have to. If you so choose to, you can as well. So it goes both ways. And I think the 4.2 GPS Compass, I think the idea was to demystify Widex a little bit and make it accessible for any clinician, those that really love getting into the handles, love getting into the nuts and bolts of it, or those that are in a hurry and want to knock off at the end of the day as well. It's basically what you make it. The latest version of GPS Compass is how I would sort of describe it. Yeah.
So I think that's quite a natural space and way to end today. And looking at the time, I think we definitely have covered all the topics we've said we'd cover. And of course, if you have further questions, reach out to your account and product manager or Widex itself, and it will get to us, and we're happy to help with any of your questions. But thank you, Mitch. That was a really great run through. Geraldine, did you want to have any parting message or anything to say to our lovely people that joined us today?
I'll take that as a no.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thanks, guys, for attending today.
It's recorded as well. Yeah. That's right. So it was recorded. We can share that as well if you wanted to go over anything in particular. But yeah, I think it's our time now to say goodbye and leave you to it. But thank you so much for joining today.
See you later, guys.